Ladies and gentlemen, I hope and pray that you are fine wherever you are. I welcome you to this platform, and I kindly request that before you watch this video, kindly subscribe to this platform. Thank you and welcome. I have been following an event in Niger. 4 days ago, the Niger Junta leaders ordered the UN resident coordinator, United Nations resident coordinator Louise Aubin, to leave the country within 72 hours. The junta leaders ordered the UN resident coordinator to leave Niger within 72 hours, that is around 3 days. By today, I hope the order expires. Now, their reason for that instruction was that the United Nations never recognized Niger in its last month's General Assembly meeting. We all know that Niger was not represented in the UN General Assembly meeting and subsequent UN agency meetings in Vienna and Riyadh. Now, the junta leaders saw the United Nations as not recognizing Niger as a member of the United Nations. Now, this directive has evoked a lot of emotions, with some saying that the junta leaders were wrong to order the UN resident coordinator from the country, some supporting the move, arguing that UN has been, let me say, unfair, unjust to African countries, more so West African countries that have recently been experiencing instability. Niger, has been one of the West African countries which has recorded the latest coup d'etat. Now, I think the United Nations were relying on the coup d'etat incident in Niger to exclude the country and its representative from the United Nations Agency General Assembly meetings. Now, to me, I want to say that I strongly support the directive by the junta leaders in Niger. Why am I saying that I support the directive by the junta leaders in Niger to order the UN resident coordinator from the country to leave the country within 72 hours? Why am I saying so? I posted a video on this platform where I did argue that the United Nations should be abolished. I said that the United Nations was formed with the primary mandate of preventing a world war. The United Nations, we remember, that replaced the League of Nations, which also failed to prevent the occurrence of World War II. The League of Nations was abolished because it was present, but World War II occurred. The United Nations is another organization which was formed with the primary mandate to prevent wars, world wars. But you will all agree with me that as we speak today, all parts of the world are at war. We understand that Hamas attacked Israel and Israel retaliated. Now the war between Hamas and Israel has attracted global attention because the likes of United States, the likes of Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, Lebanon, and the rest are declaring their interests in this war. We also know that the Russia-Ukraine war is ongoing, and this war has attracted global attention. Now, we can simply say that currently, when we speak currently, the world is at war. And the world is at war, yet we have a body which was formed with the primary mandate to prevent war. The United Nations has failed. The United Nations has failed terribly to prevent the occurrence of wars. I believe what the United Nations bosses or representative needed to do was to invite Niger leaders and to find a solution, to find a stable government for the country. That was a priority. And I believe the junta leaders needed to be engaged on a global agenda, global platform, for them to find a secure government for the people of Niger. And if the United Nations never invited Niger leaders, that means that the United Nations was being unfair. It was as if neglecting Niger, not forgetting that Niger is one of the member countries of the United Nations. Now, the United Nations has, over the years and recently, in my view, I see the United Nations as aligning itself with Western countries and other European nations. When NATO speaks, the United Nations speaks. When the European Union speaks, the United Nations speaks. The United Nations, NATO, and the European Union, they speak the same language. And for those who will agree with me, the language of NATO, the language of the European Union is war. That means that the United Nations is speaking war. The United Nations is simply lobbying for war. An organization, an agency which was formed to prevent war, is currently lobbying for war. An organization that was created to create peace between countries, between governments, is now antagonizing governments. An organization that was created with the primary mandate to focus on solving issues, internal issues in various member states, is currently turning a blind eye to issues that directly affect citizens. The case of Niger requires immediate attention. And I believe, as I had discussed before, mentioned before, the United Nations needs to organize a meeting of all heads of states, a meeting of all member countries, a meeting of the United Nations General Assembly and the Security Council, with the main objective of discussing Africa, how to prevent wars, how to end all the ongoing wars. I said that the United Nations should convene a meeting with the agenda of ending all the ongoing wars. If the meeting is to focus on Africa first, then the United Nations must convene a meeting with the agenda of ending wars in DR Congo, ending the ongoing war in Sudan, ending the ongoing war in West African countries currently under junta governments. If the meeting is about the war between Russia and Ukraine, the United Nations must convene a meeting with the ideology, with the objective to end the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, because in the bottom line, innocent citizens suffer. If the United Nations must convene a meeting, then the meeting should focus on ending the ongoing war between Hamas and Israel, because in the end, the innocent civilians in these countries are the ones suffering. If the United Nations is not ready to do this, then I consider the United Nations an agitator for war. I consider the United Nations an agency, an organization which is lobbying for war. I fully support the undertaking, the directive by the Niger Junta leaders to order the UN boss to leave the country within 72 hours. Because, to me, the United Nations has become a puppet of NATO and the European Union. The United Nations is currently speaking the language of NATO and currently speaking the language of the European Union. And you all know that the NATO and the European Union are speaking war. If they are speaking war, then that means that the United Nations is also speaking war. An agency which was formed with the primary objective of preventing war must live to its agenda. the United Nations must fast track where it lost the track, let me say so, because currently the United Nations is not living up to its objective. The agency has been swayed, has been distracted, and is currently supporting governments that are promoting war. The world needs peace, and if peace must be achieved, then the United Nations must be in the forefront. The world needs peace, and if this peace must be achieved, then the United Nations must stamp up efforts to solve the ongoing crisis. The world needs peace, and if this peace is to be achieved, then the United Nations must end all the ongoing wars. The United Nations must negotiate the crisis between Russia and Ukraine. The United Nations must negotiate the ongoing war between Hamas and Israel. If these are done, then I will consider the United Nations that it has redeemed itself. And before this is done, the United Nations has not redeemed itself. The United Nations must, from now henceforth, convene meetings with the primary agenda of ending all the ongoing wars, because in the bottom line, the world needs peace.